Shortly following his debut on the world scene in Captain America Civil War, Tom Holland's Peter Parker returns to Queens, New York. But rather than feeling content as everyone's friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, Peter dreams of living up to his future potential right here and now, as a member of the Avengers. And it's this desire to grow up quick that will get him in a lot of trouble that will somehow feel familiar, yet also all new, including his inevitable run-in with Michael Keaton's working-class criminal, Adrian Toomes, in Spider-Man Homecoming. Hi, I'm Cinematico Magnifico of AmoralCrackpot.com, and welcome to the Nightly Chill. 15 years ago, the world waited with bated breath to witness firsthand what Sam Raimi and Tobey Maguire had in store for all of us with the first ever Spider-Man feature film, a movie that ultimately proved exciting, heartwarming, and heartbreaking. But while it succeeded as a love letter to Marvel's campier and more melodramatic Silver Age of stories, it still suffered from a few visual hiccups caused by Raimi pushing the boundaries of his movie's budget, an issue no amount of creative directorial work could ever hope to fully cover up. And not only was Peter forced to go from high school senior to college student during the film's first act, but his antics as Spider-Man were minimized as much as possible. His web-slinging through New York was incredibly limited to a few key shots, and his fights were quick-cut brawls or rubbery CGI bouncing on screen. But despite its shortcomings, the heart of what made a great Spider-Man story was always present. The charm, the soap opera love stories, the colorful world of Marvel Comics accurately brought to life for the very first time. Unfortunately, when Sony decided to reboot the series with Andrew Garfield in the costume and director Mark Webb behind the camera, the series suffered from convoluted, contrived plots that attempted to stuff far too much into a single movie. And ultimately, there was little fun to be found between the two films. Now, there was plenty of charm to be had between Garfield and Emma Stone's Gwen Stacy, but their love story, initially a major focus for the pair of films, and arguably the only redeeming aspect of the duology, but this touching love story felt rushed and brushed aside in Sony's efforts to craft an entire cinematic universe of their own. When rumors proved to be truth, movie fans began whispering about the possibilities, both good and bad, about Marvel attempting to rein in a franchise that once had audiences eagerly looking forward to the next movie. Of course, that was a time when comic book movies, let alone Spider-Man movies, were a rarity that only graced theaters once every several years. And now there were 2 or 3 movies featuring the wall crawler that had left a bitter taste in our collective mouth. And even after both the success of Civil War and the hero's welcome Tom Holland's Spider-Man received, there were still questions and doubts that lingered about Marvel and Sony being able to work together for the benefit of the franchise and its fans. But now with Spider-Man Homecoming hitting theaters this weekend, it's safe to say that all worries, doubts, and questions should be laid to rest. Sony, Marvel, director Jon Watts, Tom Holland, and everyone else involved with the movie have crafted a final product that not only lives up to the earlier films, but exceeds them in almost every way imaginable. Not only is the budget and technology finally available these days for director Jon Watts to bring the visual nature of the character to life, but Holland's performance somehow contributes even more. His Spider-Man is a lovable goof who can't stop talking, bouncing around in convincing fashion, or acting heroic even when it would be smarter for him to simply run in the other direction. This Spider-Man is not a selfless hero from a bygone era, one uncaring of the danger to himself. Instead, Holland's Spider-Man is largely oblivious to the danger he's frequently in because he's too preoccupied with helping others. He leaps into action before thinking, and it costs him time and time again. This is not only the bravest on-screen depiction of the character to date, but also the most vulnerable, the most authentic in every regard. And this point is worth repeating, because not only is Holland's Spider-Man believable in this colorful, fantastic world that's been established by Marvel over the past decade, but so is his Peter Parker. Peter in this movie is very much an awkward teenager. He's not the sweater vest wearing nerd that originally graced Raimi's movies or the pages of Amazing Fantasy number 15 over 50 years ago, nor is he the strange, too cool outcast portrayed by Andrew Garfield. Instead, he's a modern-day outcast who struggles to fit in anywhere, be it with other superheroes or a school filled with other gifted but wholly awkward students. And that includes Peter's best friend, Jacob Batalon's Ned, a character who should somehow come across as even more socially awkward than Peter, yet is actually the strong supportive rock Peter needs most. And that's what really catapults this movie above past efforts. This one movie somehow crafts a world that feels fleshed out in a way that the previous 5 movies combined failed to do. We not only witness Peter Parker getting bullied once or twice and then taking to punching bad guys, we also get to watch Peter struggle to talk with a smart and beautiful Liz. He builds a Lego Death Star with his best friend. There's also Marissa Tomei's Aunt May, who is shown to be a woman who is uncomfortable but determined in her role as Peter's surrogate mother. Even Robert Downey Jr. organically fits into what is very much a Peter Parker-centric movie by filling the otherwise vacant role of Peter's father figure, which itself feels like a natural evolution of Downey's decade-long portrayal of Tony Stark. Peter even takes time to buy a sandwich to eat during his nightly patrol, having a fun little bit of dialogue with a deli store owner as he does so. This is Peter's world, and we're being invited to watch him live in it. But most of all, this movie handles the lingering issue of multiple villains with grace. Keaton's Adrian Toomes is a menacing but sympathetic figure that feels nuanced. His backstory as a hard-working business owner and family man, inadvertently put out of business by Tony Stark in the Avengers, is short and to the point, but doesn't feel lacking in any real way. We know just enough of what motivates him and why it's driven him to criminal antics that invariably have him crossing paths with Spider-Man. More so, Keaton's character never feels crazed, never feels cartoonish. In fact, despite the movie's lighthearted tone, Keaton is easily one of the darker villains in a comic book movie to date. Toomes is not evil or crazy, instead he's a desperate man driven to desperate lengths who will now do anything to ensure his family is taken care of. And this includes threatening a teenager's life in a cold, no-nonsense scene that will leave you excited for future installments. Installments that will hopefully see Keaton return to this role. And all the while, we get several other villains playing smaller utility roles as Toomes' henchmen. Comic fans will no doubt know exactly who is on screen, but movie audiences needn't have flashbacks to Spider-Man 3 or The Amazing Spider-Man 2. These characters aren't fully fleshed out supervillains just yet, but rather characters who are only there to work for Toomes. They build and sell his equipment and weapons. They act as hired muscle to rough up Spider-Man, while Toomes focuses on his real goal of pulling off the biggest heist imaginable. Of course, Spider-Man Homecoming isn't without its shortcomings, real or perceived. Some characters do feel a bit underutilized or underdeveloped, namely Tomei's May or Laura Harrier's Liz. They work well in the few scenes they get, but both women are so charming and fitting in this movie that I simply wanted to see more of them. The story can also feel a little underwhelming when compared to previous entries in the franchise or to the greater Marvel Cinematic Universe. This is very much a Peter Parker story, a coming-of-age story set in a high school that just also happens to have a Spider-Man in it. Fans of the character and comic are sure to see this as a welcome reprieve from the larger-than-life, high-stakes melodramas seen elsewhere in the past 15 years. But some are sure to be left a little deflated when they realize the movie is largely centered on Peter's struggle with growing up and fitting in. Yes, he and the Vulture do go at it. Yes, he stops petty criminals. Yes, there are fun, flashy set pieces. But such things are smartly spread out and built up to throughout the movie. Much of the time we get to watch Peter mature just a little bit more with every new step he takes. The stakes are relatively low, but the emotional investment and payoff are exactly where they need to be. Those waiting for a Spider-Man movie that finally lives up to the potential promised by earlier entries will be left happy and thrilled by Spider-Man Homecoming. Fans of Marvel's Cinematic Universe will be excited by the potential opportunities to be dug into with future installments. And for those who have loved the character for as long as I have, we can all finally welcome our one true cinematic webhead home. Marvel and Sony's Spider-Man Homecoming is without a shadow of a doubt a big chill. That's gonna do it for us tonight on the Nightly Chill. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and follow, and also be sure to leave me any questions, comments, suggestions for future reviews, and maybe even discuss today's movie at greater length. And as always, this video is brought to you in part by our viewers. If you'd like to learn how to support this and other projects, please visit amoralcrackpot.com or check the description below. But until next time, y'all need to make like a tree and get out of here.